Hi, everyone, and welcome to day 48. For those of you who've now watched day 47, the theme of today's episode is Don't Break Another Glass Ornament. There was just glass everywhere. Tune into day 47 for more about that. Today's t-shirt is going back to Japan. I love this shirt because it reminds me of riding the trains through Tokyo. It was a very happy time. But let's talk about the journey. Today ended up becoming a really interesting combination of technical realization, some maintenance work, and honestly, a deeper look at what performance actually is once the basic mechanics start stabilizing. The morning session was, so we were doing gold today, which is just lock things in. And we started with Be Prepared. And it ended up feeling like one of the clearest examples of what the gold days are supposed to accomplish. No real dramatic breakthroughs. That's not what I'm looking for. Not trying to force everything into position. I'm just trying to maintain things, calibrate them, stabilize them, effectively knowing that I can keep reproducing at least a certain base level. And in that process, quietly learn how the instrument itself is functioning under the performance. First take today was 170. It immediately felt stable in a way that was really encouraging. The energy level felt balanced instead of forced. The theatrical side stayed connected naturally, and most of the bass notes held together much better than expected until the standard degradation at the end of the piece. Now, it wasn't perfect by any stretch, but sustainable. And that was what I was looking for. And increasingly, I'm realizing that sustainable may actually be one of the most important words in this project. So playback afterwards revealed a couple of places where things softened more than I intended. The great example is Just Listen to Teacher. It's like, so where do we feature Just Listen to Teacher? Which is increasingly revealing itself as one of those lines, as I just did, naturally wants to drift into a quiet conversational tone. So I actually have to hold the support up, even though I'm dropping down the general attack of it. It's a smarmy line. It's almost a seductive line. And you don't belt somebody with seduction. Well, that depends on them. But at the same time, there were several line readings that suddenly felt alive instead of just performed. And honestly, the overall classification afterwards felt very appropriate for the day. Somewhere between really strong calibration and slightly weak performance. I can sit in that zone. That is okay for me. There was one of those wonderful, bizarre moments. I am, to expedite things, still as my hand heals, using dictation software called Mac Whisper. Once again, it demonstrated that speech recognition systems and live human cognition don't always share the same priorities. At one point, I said I played with some character, something or other, and I looked down and it said I plagued with some character, which is an entirely different way of interacting with your other actors. I have to actually proofread everything I dictate before it's transcribed. Anyway, the important realization came during the next take. For the first time, I would say, I became really consciously aware of what appears to be the alignment shift involved in stabilizing the bass notes. The best description at the time I came up with was, in the moment, it felt like gears were shifting into place. Once I found the alignment, a lot of the bass notes suddenly became much more stable, landed physically stronger, and internally understandable instead of feeling like I was reaching for something or groveling for something. And it definitely wasn't temporary. Now, I'm feeling it. I'm getting an idea of where it's located and how it works. I absolutely do not have full control of that yet. At the very end of the song, I slide, be prepared. And that was a combination of being in one gear position and then being in another gear position and trying to do it smoothly. I personally think I burned out the clutch on that one because I know it wavered all over the place toward the bottom. But the important change was that the system is no longer feeling mysterious. I'm beginning to get a mental idea of the mechanics that I'm involving to do this. Honestly, that may be one of the biggest technical shifts this project's had so far. And being able to have my vocal range up here and still be able to produce deeper notes, that makes me really happy. Earlier in the journey, a lot of the lower notes often felt like survival. If it wasn't at the right time of the day, with the right conditions, and the cat wasn't asleep, just sometimes they were there, sometimes they weren't, sometimes I could stabilize, sometimes I couldn't. I just didn't understand why. But today felt different. Today felt like I was beginning to understand what the instrument itself might actually be doing physically under the sound. Now, if I could only find the spit valve, wrong instrument. There was another realization that the octave-hop section still causes me to actually pull out of performance mode and start consciously managing technique instead of staying inhabited in the character. Be king undisputed, respected, saluted, and seen for the wonder I am. It's up an octave, and the way I've been practicing it is just keeping it on the same octave. But inside I'm going, but I really want to match this as arranged. And it makes sense because that's still one of the mechanically hardest areas of the piece for me. After I finished with my Be Prepared session, I took some time to think about the octave hop. And I realized something else that's probably been sitting in front of me for a while without me acknowledging it directly. Even though Be Prepared overall has increasingly stabilized as a theatrical performance, maintenance anchor piece, the octave hop section itself is not actually being formally worked. I'm spending too much time going through the song and not octave hopping, and as a result has had almost zero real construction work done compared to the most of the rest of the arrangement, composed of all the rest of the arrangement. At this point, that section is honestly the main thing preventing the piece from functioning as arranged all the way through. Now, most of the song has relatively stable continuity. I'm increasingly able to stay inside the character while performing it, but that octave hop area pushes into pretty much that same upper coordination instability, calm. It pushes me into that same area that I'm already dealing with in Boulevard. So on top of that, it has to survive a smooth transition in and a smooth transition out disputed, and it's one of these things. And that's not even developed yet. So what really became obvious is that I haven't actually given that section concentrated construction work yet. I worked around it, I've worked through it, I've managed it, I've survived it, but nowhere near actually beating on it like I am Boulevard. And of course, beating on it is so not the correct term, because it is always that effortless thing that you're trying to get to. I really haven't exposed it or myself to the kind of focused repetition, the endurance work, and frankly, the integration practice that would let it settle in more permanently. So, as I said, I thought about this between sessions, and part of what's changing now is actually I've redone part of the scheduling for this week and started scheduling ahead for next week. So Be Prepared is going to start getting more consistent rehearsal presence throughout the week, specifically to put more construction emphasis onto that octave transition region. I want to expose where the unstable notes are more regularly. I want to improve continuity throughout those transitions and gradually integrate that section more naturally into the rest of the piece, instead of treating it like this isolated mechanical obstacle sitting in the middle of toward the end of an otherwise stable performance. And it's going to be the same thing. I'm reaching up for a note that I shouldn't be reaching for so much as knowing that it's in my range. I should just be accessing it. And I can tell you right now, since I go from undisputed, King Undisputed, respected, saluted, and seen. So there's really just a right turn up the line. And it's going to take more work. Okay, 2 sessions today. That's why I'm running a little longer. The second session today was Boulevard. And interestingly enough, it ended up reinforcing a completely different side of almost the same lesson. Today, Boulevard work primarily focused heavily on coordination blending, linking the phrases fluidly, trying to maintain the energy level, and at the same time reducing the volume and not overshooting. It sounds like a lot of stuff. One of the most interesting things that happened was realizing that the newer guardrails that I've been developing are increasingly functioning before the system derails. The first line of Boulevard is, "I walk alonely," or more properly, "I walk alonely." And throughout the chorus, things increasingly corrected themselves before turning into full collapse territory. First take, especially educational, because I intentionally, what was that, the second one? I think that was the second one. I intentionally tried lowering the volume while keeping the same energy and emotional connection to the music. I had discovered one evening when I was just sitting in bed, instead of throwing an F4 out there, "My lonely," I was just marking it term in performance, that is to just do it really quietly. And it was and I hit the note. So I figured I would try that. Surprisingly enough, the notes placed more accurately. The phrases linked together more naturally. And that bass section especially started to actually feel much closer to the flow that sounds like the other vocalists in the music itself. But there was also a trade-off. Lowering the volume improved placement and coordination, but also caused some retreat in vocal color and recording presence, which led to another realization. Quieter execution currently improves placement, but weakens some of the stronger tonal development that's recently started to emerge. And then came probably the biggest realization of the Boulevard session. For the first time, I found myself listening to parts of the piece and realizing that the technique itself was actually getting very strong, while simultaneously recognizing that there is still another layer beyond technique that creates what I can only really describe as the magic in a performance. And I want to be careful describing this because I realized I could really misexplain this very easily. So, as an example, I was thinking of somebody I heard perform Lucifer's part in a song called Vox Populi from season 2 of Has Been Hotel. That's all I'm saying about that for now. The singer was phenomenal. His performance was great. Great emotion. Great understanding of the character, ownership of the material. He absolutely made the performance his own. But there was still this tiny remaining percentage that specifically belonged to singer Jeremy Jordan himself. And realizing that actually became really important, because the missing thing that I'm sensing isn't technical ability, and it's not the commitment, it's not the interpretation. All of those things are falling into place. The performance begins in places to feel lived, but there's apparently that next layer beyond that, something unique and internal that creates sparkle, inevitability, identity, whatever you want to call it. And weirdly enough, realizing that felt really positive. Earlier in this project, I probably would have looked almost entirely at whether something was technically working or not. But now, the rehearsal space is increasingly shifting beyond pure technical reconstruction and into deeper interpretation and performance identity. You learn the technique and then you let go of the technique because it's going to be there for you. And where you go with it is that special place for that performance. And honestly, I think that's the really important shift that occurred today. By the end of the take, because I'm now basically out of breath at the end of one take, fatigue had definitely arrived, so neither take really got bounced, and I stopped there. But despite that, today's Boulevard session felt really productive. Yeah. So, that is day 48. We are so close to day number 50. Who knows what I'm going to do? But for now, I think that's enough for today. Sorry, thank you as always if you're watching the video. It's an interesting journey. It is often a strange journey, but it is an evolving journey. And I've even started to look back on some of the older episodes to see how things have already changed, as I am now 48. Is that 8 times 6? 7 into 48 is, 49 tomorrow is 7 weeks. Wow, that's more than I really expected far further than my little ADHD body is really committed to most of anything. So, tomorrow, 7 squared, 49. Until then, later.